Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the College of Engineering virtual brown bag events. Today we have an alumni spotlight, and I am very excited to be hosting today because I had this alumni as one of my students. And I'm very excited for you guys to hear about his journey. Our alum today with us is Ivan Alagenchev, and he is currently a principal engineer at Amazon. So you are going to get to hear about what he does now, as well as his journey, how he got there from UTA, maybe even a little bit about how he got to UTA in the first place, just to give us the whole story. So Yvonne, I'm going to turn it over to you to start off and give us a little, tell us whatever you would like to share with us on your background and everything else. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. I never imagined that one day I'll be doing this presentation. Yeah. So when I was asked to do this, as you know, there wasn't much guidance. There was a lot of freedom as to what to choose. And when I was preparing the slides, I kind of decided to go back and think about what are some of the things that I would have liked to hear from somebody in my position. And I think something that would have really helped me is to show more of like the human side and the struggle, and that it's not like a straight road and it's not easy to get here. And there's a lot of twists and turns and inflection points and decisions where it can go wrong or one way or another. And to kind of like give my future self an encouragement that it's doable. It's not that complicated and anyone can do it. And also give obviously some insight as to what an engineer, what a principal engineer at Amazon does on a daily basis. And I think this, my experiences from Amazon, but I think the experience is probably very similar in other companies like Google and Microsoft and Apple, LinkedIn and Netflix, Twitter, like the big tech companies that I assume that everyone that is doing computer science nowadays is aspiring to like at least try working there one day. So yes, I was a UTA alumnus. I am a UTA alumnus. I think I graduated back in 2008, ancient times by present day standards. So like I said, first, let me say that this is my path. These are my opinions. This is not necessarily a good or an optimal path. Everyone is in a different place in life. Everyone is dealt different cards in life. Everyone will have a different journey through life. And it's up to any individual to decide what is the best journey for them. And maybe I'm getting old and I'm starting to realize that the journey is what really counts, and that's part of the joy. And nothing that is like nothing that is worth it comes easy. So again, it's not a straight path. I personally took longer than usual. I have a lot of people that I talk to, and their opinion is that it's awesome. You're like an engineer at Amazon. It's top of the world, amazing growth, a lot of influence. But the truth is that I took longer than usual, and it was challenging and it wasn't straightforward. And even nowadays, imposter syndrome is real. We have regular meetings, I think, every 2 weeks of the principal engineering community at Amazon, and everyone they're doing the first work of their life, and they're just not good engineers, even as principal engineers at Amazon. So the imposter syndrome is very real. If I have to look back, I would say that perseverance is more important than having great skills, than being smart, and even being talented, because you can work on those things, you can improve, you can get them. As long as you set your vision, your mind to it, you can achieve anything. And lastly, I believe software is eating the world. There's like, if you read Hacker News regularly, You can Google that. You can read an essay. I think it's from Paul Graham, and I firmly subscribe to it. I kind of got lucky to get in computer science, kind of like a glitch in the matrix. And I'll speak a bit about it. I wasn't thinking about becoming a programmer or getting in computer science at all. It just happened. I got into it because that's what I genuinely enjoyed and what I wanted to do with my life. It just happened to be the most valuable skill, in my opinion, in the world that we live in nowadays, in the age that we live in. So everyone that has chosen computer science is their path. You're doing the right thing. You're on the right path, and amazing things await you. And I want to bring up a quote by Eric Schmidt from Google. If you offered a seat on a rocket ship, you don't ask what seat, you just get on. And computer science is a rocket ship, in my opinion. So kudos to everyone that is watching this talk right now, because I assume you're all going for computer science. So my journey started here. I was born on the sea coast in Bulgaria. That's pretty much how it looks. My grandparents had a condo 5 minutes walking from the beach, so my childhood was amazing. I didn't need a car to get anywhere. You can see people walking, so I had a lot of freedom to do whatever the heck I wanted. And I grew up in the late 80s and the 90s, and the world was different back then. We didn't have any cell phones. I didn't have computers. I don't know how many Americans had computers in the early 90s at that time, but I didn't have a computer. And as a kid, you just get on a bike, go anywhere, do whatever the heck you want. And it was amazing. But the 90s came, and with that, some changes. Here on the left side, you have the fall of the Berlin Wall. Bulgaria was a communist country up until 1989, when basically the Iron Curtain fell and the Eastern Bloc was freed. Well, I mean, if you remember my previous slide, freedom is a funny thing. I don't think I felt like I was an extremely free individual. But looking at from people from the West, thinking about the East at that time, the general thinking is that freedom doesn't exist there. I had an extremely free childhood, and I was able to do whatever the heck I wanted. Excuse my French. So on the left is the fall of the Berlin Wall, followed very quickly by protests in Sofia, Bulgaria. And just like that, we were now a democratic country, which brought a lot of changes in my childhood. So a lot of, skateboarding was really big. I think Tony Hawk made like was really big at the time. Punk was big, metal was big, later hip hop. We were riding the wave, essentially. But with that, Hollywood came around. American movies were very mainstream, and I started watching some of these about Wall Street. And I was thinking, this is what I want to do. This is the cool stuff. Ironically, when I was in school, well, actually, before we get to school, change also brought in some not so nice things and some not so nice people. You probably hear nowadays about the Russian oligarchs. Very similar were the 90s in Bulgaria. As you change everything from planned economy to capitalistic society, there are people in the right places that are able to get the right knowledge and orient themselves correctly and essentially capitalize on it very fast, and not always through the nicest means. So they get super rich super fast, they grow super quick super fast, and they also fall very quickly, as you can see on the right. So I was aspiring to have the cool life that Eddie Murphy was having on TV, but I didn't want to end up like these folks. So I figured I have to change something. And I'll go back to the next slide first, and then I'll go back. I decided to come to the United States of America because Hollywood made it super glitzy and nice. Interestingly, I came to Texas. What you see in Hollywood is San Francisco and New York, which are very different from Texas. It just happened that my first stop was in Dallas, and I went to school in East Texas, Longview High School in East Texas. It's like a tiny town. But before that, actually, I would like to go back to the previous slide a bit and talk about school in Bulgaria. I wouldn't say I was bad. I never enjoyed things like biology, chemistry, physics. I didn't super enjoy math. I wasn't great at it. I didn't like writing essays. So I wasn't interested in literature and journalism. I genuinely had no clue what I want to do in life. And I took computer science classes back in Bulgaria, and it looked a lot like this. We were doing Pascal on a blackboard. I didn't have a computer at home. It was still in kind of like the early stages, at least for Bulgaria, and my parents couldn't really afford a computer, or maybe they could, but they just thought I would spend it on what a teenager would, video games and internet at the time, because internet had already come about. We had dial-up. Things like IRC were fashionable because you could meet people. But we were doing this in school, and I just thought this was the most boring thing ever. Who in their right mind writes scribbles on a board and tries to figure out what's going on, and there is nothing happening? So it just didn't click. It didn't click for me. I almost failed my computer science class. I think I passed with a D. It's probably my lowest grade in high school. So I came to the US. Interestingly, tickets to come to the US before school starts were really pricey. I think, like, if I have to speak in like present day money, it was like $3,000. And now I think I realize what the reason is for that. You know, everybody goes on vacation in the summer and comes back in school, so there's a huge demand, supply is low, prices go up. So I came to school, I came to the US, I think it was September 13th or something like that. And school had already started in East Texas. So I go to school. There you go. And I go to the principal, and he has this Bulgarian kid in front of him that doesn't speak great English. I knew some English. I had taken some English courses back in Bulgaria. And all of the classes are full. And what I found out is that in the US, people elect their courses and they decide what they want to take. You know, there's a curriculum that you have to complete to get to graduate, but you can pick and choose when you want to take those classes. So the only thing that were left out were the things that nobody else wanted to take. Things like calculus, geography, computer science, English, and health. And all of the AP classes were free. I mean, as in like there were free spots left. So he looks at me, and I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. And he's like, "You're from Eastern Europe, so you must be good in math. So we'll put you in math. Of course, you're not American, so you have to be good in geography." No one at the time, computer science was not big at all. So no one wanted to take computer science. We'll just put you in computer science. You're Eastern European. You have to be good on soccer. We're throwing you in soccer. You know, so much generalization about what an individual is. And they also stuck me in AP English because they needed to fill up my curriculum and they just had to put me somewhere, and health. I can't comprehend how somebody put me in AP English the moment I got off the airplane. I missed a slide. I wanted to just share some facts that I recollect from year 2000. I found out that Floridians don't know how to vote. That was a pretty big deal in 2000. If you go back and read about Al Gore and Bush. Gas was 99 cents a gallon. What was interesting to me is that people were driving around in cars just for the fun of it. I can't imagine that doing that right now with $4 a gallon, at least here. Napster was huge, and MP3s. Uh, People were going online using AOL. Imagine that. Looking back, looks so funny. And Texas was super hot at the time, and it still is. I was just there this summer. It's amazingly hot state. So I go to my AP computer science class, and this is what I'm presented with. And if you have to remember, this is what I had before. So I look at this, and I'm like, this is awesome. You can actually tell it what to do, and it will just do whatever you tell it to. And it will, I mean, it will complain if you do it wrong, but it's awesome, and it has colors and squiggles, and it's nice and cool. And up until then, I had no clue what to do with my life. And that moment right there, my first class computer science in high school, I was like, this is what I'm going to do in my life. And I didn't do it for money. I wanted to do it because I thought it was going to be fun. And it just happened that computer science is top of the world, and everybody needs programmers nowadays. So it's like super awesome and cool to be one. But it wasn't like that back in the day. So as a kid coming to a new country, the top thing on your mind, now that you know what you want in life, and you know you want to go and achieve it, you got to figure out how to do it. So I realized that, you need to go through school to become a programmer, or at least it's a good idea to go through school. So my thinking is, how do I make it through school? Especially when you come from a ex-communist country, standard of living are a bit different. You got to pay for out-of-state tuition. School is really expensive. I'm sure a lot of you can know a thing or two about it. So what I did is I went to a junior college, and you learn about these. No one told me how to do these things. I didn't have any parents or mentors or people to just guide me through the process of obtaining education in the U.S. You know what you want to achieve, and you just figure out how to do it. You read, you get information. Luckily for our age, we had internet at the time, so information was at our fingertips. I watched a video of, I think it was Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos back in the 90s, and there was like an interview on CNN, and they were saying the information superhighway, which is like so 90s talk, but when you think about it, it's really true. It is information superhighway at your fingertips. You can just tap everything you need. You can learn anything you want in this world. So I needed to somehow pay for the school. So I realized that if I have great GPA, they'll give me a scholarship. So I was like, okay, fine. I'll just make sure I have the best GPA I can possibly get. And that was a 4.0. So I can get a scholarship. That's what I did. I got a 4.0 at Kilgore College, and I transferred to the other school that would give me a really nice scholarship, and it was UT Arlington. I got accepted in some other schools that were considered better than UT Arlington, but I went to UT Arlington because that's what I could afford to get. I got 2 jobs. I was doing 2 jobs, so I had to figure out how to, because schools were my top priority. It wasn't the jobs. I had to figure out how to fit the schooling and the work together. So I took the bare minimum to be full-time, which was 12 credits. I focused on math, science, and programming because I knew I wanted to be a computer programmer. If I have to, and Dr. Tiernan is on the call, but if I have to look back on my experience at UTA, the absolute best course that I took, and the one that changed my career, was CSE 1320. And you have to, and it's not because it's like the most foundational course or it will teach you the most about computer science. It's because it was the first course where I was faced with what I consider to be true programming, real challenging programming. I remember the last assignment we were given was to sort books in a library in a doubly linked list, and we had to swap nodes in the linked list from them. Obviously, if you do sorting, you had to just swap things, and you had head pointer back and back pointer forward. And you had to make sure that you've got the memory allocations together and you don't screw up things in memory. And I was doing terrible, miserably bad in that one assignment. Dr. Tiernan doesn't know this because this is all happening in the background. She has no clue about what students are doing. So up until then, so you have to realize my experience was on a blackboard. I took a few computer programming courses in Kilgore College at the junior college. The way I used to code, I would get the assignment and I would code everything. And I would run the inputs and I'll get something not working right. And I'll read the code and trying to understand the issue, fix it, do it again. But when you have something really complex, like doing sorting in a double linked list, or at least what I considered complex at the time, that breaks down because you can't really fit it in your head. You have to see what's happening. I didn't know how to do this. No one has showed me that. I didn't know how to debug. So there was another student at the time that was extreme, and he still is extremely smart. So I went to him and I told him, I'm going to give up. This is not for me. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I got myself this far, and I'm a horrible programmer. I can't do this. It's terrible. I'm just not cut for this. I'll have to figure something else to do in life. And it's kind of late in the game. This was third year in college, essentially. And he basically showed me how to do console.out to inspect variables and data structures and essentially do debugging. Not even using a debugger, because we were using GCC and Vim for coding at that time. Later, I found there is a tool called DDD for debugging programs like that on Linux, but we didn't know at the time, so we just used console.out. And that moment right there is one of the points in life that changed my life. There are many points in life that change your direction in life. So fast forward, we did the normal classes: theory, algorithms, computer architecture, and so on. But they weren't so important to me because at that time I had the recipe. I knew what to do. I graduated in 2008. What I didn't realize at the time is that the journey is just beginning. I got the degree, but you haven't made it in life yet. A degree is not enough. It doesn't mean anything if you don't do anything with it. I was offered an interview with Microsoft. I was the Microsoft student partner at UT Arlington at the time. So kind of as a thank you for that, Microsoft was basically giving an on-site interview for everyone that was a student partner, basically to try and come in at Microsoft. It wasn't a free job. You couldn't just get in and get accepted. You had to go through the interviewing, and I didn't go. I did not even go for the interview. And the reason for that is imposter syndrome. I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't think I could make it. So I didn't go. Instead, I went to a mid to late stage startup in Denver, Colorado. It was my first job. I managed to get the job before I even graduated. I flew to Colorado, got interviewed, got hired. It was $60,000 a year, my first computer programming job. We were doing secure online storage, kind of like Dropbox before Dropbox was around and was big. Everything was in C#. I was the most junior hire ever. I was the cockiest, though. So I was in constant arguments with their most senior engineer. Some valid, some maybe not. I don't know. But single-handedly built their core product from the grounds up because I love programming. This is my passion. So I wanted to make sure that I'm the best I can be at it. And I took as much, I was taking as much responsibility and influence as they would give me. everything was great. But we had some bitter endings at the time. Due to visa issues, I had to leave the country, spend some time abroad. They wanted to lower my salary while I was abroad because, in America we pay high. You go outside, we would pay less. The problem is you don't do that to your main guy or girl, especially if you're very, 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 very reliant on them. So I never forgot that. And you take one hit, two hits, third one you change. You do something about it. Very famous individual said, "Fool me once, fool me twice, fool me thrice, you get fooled again." Something like that. Management changed, and they made some not so great decisions on the business side. And they put in a scrum master who started micromanaging me like crazy. And I still to this day, I don't appreciate micromanagement. So I decided to quit. But I learned some lessons in that process. And one thing I've realized about life is that every mistake and every bad thing that happens to you is a lesson. And sometimes you have to go through the lessons to internalize them and not just have other people tell you. But I decided to take control of my destiny. I decided to never, ever, ever again limit my own self. Remember that interview with Microsoft where I didn't go? One of the stupidest decisions in my life, in retrospect. I decided that would never happen again. I'll shoot for the stars. And I will not be afraid of the unknown. Because if you do these things, sometimes things end up being worse. I had to make some decisions. I had to decide between USA versus Canada. I was really having a hard time getting a permanent residency in the US, just because of the way the visa process works. I was deciding between grad school and work. And for many reasons, I'm not going to get into them right now. I decided to go with grad school. So I was going from a $60,000 job in 2008, which, I mean, everyone is a student now on the call. Most people are students nowadays on the call, but the point is I had to go from 60,000 to essentially a stipend of $12,000. And I had a wife and a kid at the time. So not an easy decision, going through grad school with wife and a kid on a $12,000 stipend, no money, what to do. And a bit easier decision was University of Virginia versus Ohio State or Colorado in Boulder. I went with UVA because I loved the city, Charlottesville. I'm a huge fan of Thomas Jefferson, and it's a very Thomas Jefferson influenced city. So I went with UVA. I picked USA because, I mean, it's an awesome country, right? So pick the USA. In grad school, I decided to go and try another Microsoft interview. I'm getting called from work. Just 1 second. I went for Bing. I had 2 months of prep, and it was a total disaster. I completely bombed it. The worst interview experience I've had in my life. So I flew from Virginia to Washington, the one on the West Coast. Interviewed. I had done 2 months prep because by then I figured that I need to practice lead code questions and that kind of stuff. And it was a horrible experience. It wasn't that I was not prepared. I was prepared, but there were some communication issues in the interview. It just didn't go well. And I find out that I'm not hired, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm a total failure. This is the worst. I'm the worst engineer ever. I can't believe this is happening to me. I will never be able to do something interesting as an engineer in life. I'm just going to give up, and I will go back to UVA and I will try to finish my PhD. Doesn't matter how. But I wasn't doing good in grad school either. My research wasn't going well. I spent a year and a half just spinning cycles, not going anywhere. My my professor wasn't happy with me, and I wasn't happy with myself because I wasn't able to come up with anything interesting. Somewhere I managed to land an internship at Mozilla. So I worked on Firefox on the security team. I came back from Mozilla and I just got a call from Amazon one day out of the blue. At the time, this was back in 2013. Amazon was growing a lot. They just needed a lot of engineers. So they gave me a call, and my attitude was, I'm no more distractions. I'm just going to finish my PhD. I'm not going to spend weeks and months prepping for an interview that could go sideways, fly to the West Coast, spend 3 days, get on a flight, get jet lagged, go through a brutal interview experience. I'm just not going to do it. It's not worth it to me. It's just a distraction. And my wife was telling me, I mean, if they're calling you, just do it, whatever happens, regardless. And the good thing is that they agreed to bring me straight to an on-site interview and do it in Baltimore, as opposed to flying me on the West Coast. So they brought in people to Baltimore. They had basically an interview event, a bunch of other people going, and it was just a 2-hour drive, or I don't know, 3 to 4 hours, depending on traffic, from Charlottesville. And we made it a trip. We got the kid, my wife and I got in the car and just decided to go have a day of fun. They decided to have a day of fun while I'm getting grilled. And I don't know if I got lucky or I just prepared, but I managed to pass it with flying colors. And what is interesting is that I managed to land an SD2 position, not an internship. So the pecking order for developers is like, you have an intern, you have SD1 who's fresh out of college, and then you have an SD2, somebody with experience. And instead of being an intern, I became an SD2 at Amazon. And from then on, I was basically given everything was in my control. I was given the freedom to do whatever I wanted to do. And through the years, I've been 80 years at Amazon now. Through proving yourself and doing the right things, and I can go a bit more in detail on that and what it takes. I'm a principal engineer now, which is essentially at the top of the engineering order at Amazon. So to speak about what it is to be a principal engineer at Amazon, you lead your org in whatever that is, design, implementation. You're very often involved in cross-cutting organizational initiatives. Think of, we want to, and I'll talk about some of the stuff that I am particularly doing, not so much about the role itself, but think of, we want to replace all of Amazon's e-commerce software, or we want to go and build AWS. If you want to do something like that, you pull in your best and brightest engineers, which are, how are we doing on time? Oh, we have time. Which are your principal engineers, and they figure it out, essentially. It's a very ambiguous, usually very ambiguous, very bold problems. Principal engineers show the path, they mentor others, and they guide them to achieving that goal. Which is the second bullet here. You provide engineering leadership for multiple teams. But there's also the kicker. When you're the leader, you're also accountable for everything, for the quality of the design, for the quality of the implementation, and you're the guardian of technical quality. So you do code reviews a lot. You go in very often, at least the way I operate. I go in, I'm usually the first person or one of the first people to set up a new service, set up the testing harness, set up the environment and the deployment methodology for that new service, for example. Because you pave the path. It's much easier to go and show how something has to be done, rather than telling people this is what you should do and expect them to do it. It doesn't work that way. It's much easier to just go do it and show them, just follow along now. Anything that happens essentially in your org, you have to be plugged into it, and people come in with different designs and proposals of things that they think should change, because other engineers are usually the experts in the specific team that they're working in. And the way those discussions go usually are, great, this is awesome idea. I agree we should do this. Have you considered these other things? Or I think we need to go back to business and understand our customers and understand our problem, and why are we building these things? It's one very common pitfall for engineers, just go and build something. But everything has a cost associated with it, even the engineers, especially the engineers. So we want to make sure that we're spending our money correctly, and we're not building something for the sake of building something, but it's an investment. Every company out there is for profit. And just like in life, just like in life, you invest your money and you expect some kind of return. That's what Amazon or Microsoft or all of the other companies are doing. They're investing their people power, essentially, which are their resources, and they're expecting some return back. So part of the job is to making sure that this is the right thing to do for the business. Since you're usually the most experienced and the most technical individual in the organization, you're expected to make a lot of other people like you. So the more Ivans we have, the better, at least the thinking is, that the better Amazon is. Whether that's true or not is to be seen, but we want other people like our principal engineers, which means that we have to grow other people. We have to invest in other people, and we have to make them better engineers and better people. Which also means that principal engineers have to work with managers to guide the growth of other engineers and evaluate and calibrate the performance of other engineers. It's just part of life. You have to work with management to say, we have to work with this individual to make them better, or this individual is great, we have to invest in them, we have to help them, we have to grow them to the next level. You're a key influence in the department, essentially. One requirement for principal engineers is to be able to look at all of the business, all of the tech, the infrastructure, the architecture, the services, the way we operate, and identify bottlenecks and areas that need to be improved, and go and influence leadership that we need to invest in this because it is the right thing to do for us as a company, either monetarily, or we're not going to be able to scale if we do this, or Microsoft is going to come and eat our lunch if we don't do this, that we're not competitive in the market, and we should invest in this. So that's part of your job, basically influencing managers. Me specifically, I report to the director of selling partner services. This is essentially all of Amazon's e-commerce. When you go buy something on the website, things happen in the back end. Orders get processed, transaction fees get calculated, balances get balanced, money gets sent or received. All of that is part of selling partner services. That involves the vendor business, which is the retail side of Amazon, where Amazon goes and procures items from the vendors. Think of like Weber and Nike, Reebok, that kind of stuff. We buy it, we sell it. The marketplace side is you have a seller somewhere in Kilgore, Texas, and they are selling ribbons, for example, for little kids. They want to sell it on Amazon. They send it to Amazon. Amazon fulfills it. We have a monetary relationship with the seller. We're handling that business, selling partner services. I am the sole principal engineer, which is, unfortunately, it becomes very difficult to scale when you're the single point of failure. For an organization of between, I want to estimate 350 to 400 engineers. I've conservatively put 300 plus on the slide. I'm responsible for the technical direction for all of these people. Some other things I have done, I've been part of a tiger team of senior and principal engineers that we were responsible basically for re-architecting all of Amazon's ERP system. ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning, I believe. Think of invoicing, money management, all of the fun things that need to happen for an e-commerce that were there since the 90s when Amazon started. We re-architected this while the plane is flying and put it in production. Like, none of you saw any glitches on Amazon.com. Well, we basically replaced everything underneath the hood, and it's a new engine now. Everything is completely new. It's not the same software that ran 30 years ago. Along the same lines, I oversaw the migration from one of the biggest financial ledgers in the world by dollar transactions. We went from Oracle to DynamoDB. This is very public. Bezos and Larry, forgot his name, the Oracle CEO, had very public spats on Twitter about how much they hate each other. And underneath the scenes, again, we switched from Oracle to AWS, and we had zero downtime, no customer impact. You're talking about 5,000 transactions per second happening, and it's an extremely challenging software engineering feat to be able to do that and have no impact. I personally worked on launching a number of new Amazon businesses, Prime Wardrobe, Amazon Go, which is just the walkout store where you go and pick an item and you just go out without having to stop at a cashier. Launched Brazil, Turkey, Souk is Middle East, Mexico and other countries. I've done technical alignment across multiple organizations as to this is the right path forward for Amazon. And I've done a few, actually just one, acquisition review where we have an external company that we're considering buying and we need a technical assessment. So we put in a few principal engineers together, we send them to review their stack and talk to their engineers, and we come back with a recommendation. How to grow? Be on a rocket ship, computer science, Amazon, and think big. Always learn, always be curious, and always have a just do it mentality, and it will just happen. My bread and butter and basically my key skills: understanding of distributed systems, how to build services that scale and are able to handle things like 5,000 transactions per second. A lot of, because I work on fintech, essentially, a lot of accounting, finance, bookkeeping concepts, not just pure engineering. You're the bridge between the business and the engineering. Being able to have succinct, crisp, clear, both written and verbal communication is very important. When you have somebody that is the VP of something or director of something, they don't need you to go and explain with 20 different sentences why something is not a good idea. You need to be able to get the point across very quickly, very crisply, and very easily understood by non-technical people as well. So most important in courses in my life, when I go back and I think about it, CSE 1320 absolutely changed my life. And English 1 and 2, and speech. Second most important are the foundation of our skill and our craft, which are computer science theory. Finite automata is really important, believe it or not. Compilers, because you understand things like abstract syntax trees and finite automata and architecture and parallelizing in the CPU. So it's really important to take a good compiler's course. Algorithms, because you need to understand when should you pick a tree versus a hash table or a queue or a stack, how they work, and the trade-offs between an exponential algorithm and an n log n algorithm. And computer architecture, so that when you discuss tech and engineering with other engineers, you don't look like a complete noob. But I personally don't work on hardware. So a week in my life, I read a lot of documents, I write a lot of documents, I mentor and influence a lot. I tell people what to do and how they should do it, essentially. Which means a lot of meetings. When you're the one principal engineer for 300 plus other engineers, they want to have a time of your life. And that sometimes equates to minutes, but when it's important, you have to give somebody hours. And it's challenging. Lots of design reviews. I push myself to do coding as much as I can. And sometimes it's 0%. I haven't committed everything in the last month, but I have close to 13,000 lines of code this year so far. And the key is time management and prioritization. If you go read online about glass balls and rubber balls, and you juggle them in the air, and if something drops, it has to be the rubber ball, because you never want to drop a glass ball. I've never done it yet. Knock on wood. Hopefully I'll never do it. Favorite distributed system design tricks. If you just want to read about it as an engineer, as computer science students, read up on queues, workflows. The other name for workflows is replayable state machines, asynchronous processing, splitting the read and the write plane. So like event source and CQRS distributed system design patterns, really important, and pre-processing. Favorite tool, the cheapest one that does the job without compromising quality. For me, that is Vim. I believe for Dr. T, that's Emacs. Favorite activities outside of work? I'm a human, just like all of us. I like fun and not just computers. Computers are fun, but I like fun outside of computers as well. I wingsurf. I like skiing a lot. I've been skiing for most of my life. That's why my first job outside of college was in Colorado and not in Texas. 25 years and still going. I like soccer. I travel a lot, and I spend time with my family. Any questions?
Thank you so much. And we have one question so far in the Q&A. We may have more now that you've filled us in on what's going on with you. So I'll start with the first Q&A question. This is actually, obviously, a lot of our audience is students, so they're thinking about their experience. And they would like to know how you cracked your first full-time job interview at a tech company. What did you do?
My first full-time, my first one that I was successful was back in Colorado, and it wasn't one of the top companies. So they didn't ask me any lead code questions. They asked me one design question, and that design question was, how do you design a pressure relief valve? It's not a computer science question. But it tests logical thinking and ability to use your head when you're throwing a curveball. I was never good at physics. I was okay in physics in college, but it wasn't my passion. So that was an interesting one. I think I did okay. And I was given computer to code essentially a producer-consumer type of multi-threading program. And I don't know, I just coded it. I mean, we do a lot of, at least at the time at UTA, I'm sure that's still going on. We did a lot of projects, and I feel it, at least I feel that UTA prepared me well for that type of an interview, where you sit down and you just have to code something. And you just do it. And that's what it was. And the design question was just thinking on your feet. For something like trying to go bigger at something like Amazon or Microsoft, read a lot on design. Just read, just learn and be curious. Just be passionate about our field and our craft. There are a lot of resources. Read on design, read on distributed systems, and go and practice lead code questions and read that Green Algorithms Bible book back to back. Take at the time was Dr. Weems. I don't know who's doing algorithms and data structures now. Take that class, practice it before the interview, and you'll do well. And just do your coursework and projects at UTA, and you'll be good enough.
Awesome. So let me check and make sure.
I think we're good on time. I think I left like 10 minutes, so I can take a lot of questions.
Excellent. So the next question that's come up is, what is the corporate culture like at Amazon?
That's a very generic question, and it's different. We're huge. It's a huge company, but it's also very startup-y in a way, as in every different org is like a separate business, and we don't really talk to each other much unless you want to. An example where we talk across the aisles is you want something from the other org, but otherwise you're doing your own business as a completely separate company. You do your own reporting financially wise. I wouldn't say it's top heavy and it's not bottom heavy either. Both are valued equally. So the way we do our planning, we get inputs from management, upper management, and we get inputs from the engineers, and we discuss what we as a team and an org, what are our priorities and what is the right thing to do, and we take both, a mix of both. You're given a lot of freedom as to because you're doing a lot of time management, you have more work than you can fit in a day. So part of the critical thing is for you as an individual to decide what is the most important thing for you and the business. And that's what you work on. And some things get dropped, but you just don't drop the important things. And that's why when you hear stories about work-life balance outside in some of these companies, it is people that haven't figured out how to do the time management and which balls to drop, because you'll always have more work than you can fit in a day.
Awesome. So in your particular, I was interested when you said that early on you were interested in Wall Street, right? That was one of your first interests as a teenager. How much do you feel like what you're doing now actually fits into that interest that you had as a teenager?
I think I wanted Wall Street looked cool on TV because it felt like those people have freedom to do whatever they want. And I believe that I know people who are doctors, people who are in finance. Very biased, obviously, opinion. I believe that computer science is nowadays the field that allows you to have the most freedom to do whatever you want, and at the same time get the most, because we work for money. To me, money is freedom, and have the best pay essentially. Doctors work crazy hours. Engineers don't. And I think that the work that we do is more fun than what people on Wall Street do, but I'm biased. So I think I did better. I think I did better than Hollywood.
Awesome. So we have another question. This is kind of entertaining question. Do you use PowerPoint for meetings, or do you write one of those 6-page memos?
Amazon is all about the 6-page memos. I write 6-page memos. I think I've used PowerPoint 5 or 6 times for the 8 years that I was at Amazon, maybe even less. Maybe that's why my PowerPoint slides were not that amusing.
So for those of us who aren't familiar with the 6-page memo, give us a real quick description.
Anytime you need to make an influence at Amazon, the way you do it is you go and you write a document. And it's not always a 6-page memo, but that's a very good size. You go and you write the document, you go and you present it to people, and they read it, and they try to poke holes in it. Essentially, that's what happens. They're trying to find something wrong with it, and you have to defend it and explain why that's the right approach. And then you go back and you modify the memo and you go and you present it again. I believe that it's the best way to communicate in a corporate environment because it allows for scale and asynchronous processing. I can write a document, write once, send it to multiple people, read multiple times, and I can use cache, upload it on Wiki. I don't have to get involved. I just scaled myself. And even if I leave the company, if my database goes down, the message doesn't get lost. PowerPoint doesn't have that same ability.
So this is a question as an instructor. So did you expect coming out of a computer science technical degree that you would do as much writing and communicating with the written word and as much reading?
No, absolutely not. I didn't want to deal with people. I wanted to code. I wanted to just be a programmer, and I wanted to code. And you can still do that in our field. You can still do it. But there's a limiting factor there because the truth is we work with people. So no, I didn't expect that. It's a huge change. I think I was always good at verbal communication. I don't know. You will be the judge.
You were.
As people listening to this talk. I was okay with written communication. There's obviously a limiting factor with me being an immigrant and being able to use a medium that is not my native communication method, English. It's challenging, but this is the world we live in. Not everyone is dealt the same deck of cards. And you just have to figure it out and do it because this is how the world works. So you either change because the world is not going to change, or you get left behind.
All right. Well, obviously your work is already trying to get you back to them, and you've given us an hour, and we appreciate it so much. It's
Absolutely.
Been so wonderful to hear about what you've done and your experiences, and I'm so glad to get to talk to you again. And thank you so much for joining us today, and for our students and for our university. And we're glad you're our alum. So thanks a lot, Ivan.
I hope it helps some people or some students to achieve what they want in life.
All right. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
And everybody else, thank you for joining us today. And check out the schedule for all the remaining virtual brown bags. Have a great afternoon.